Today's guest is Laura Vanderkam. She is the author of several time management and productivity books, and her TED Talk garnered over 13 million views. Her newest book, Tranquility by Tuesday, tells us the 9 ways to calm the chaos and make time for what matters most. In today's podcast episode, you are going to learn how to look at your time in weeks, in the 168 hours you have in a week versus your days, to prioritize the things that are most important to you and really make meaningful memories and take time for yourself. I love everything that Laura teaches, and I'm so excited to have her on the show to give us what we want most, and that is time. Oh my goodness, Laura, I'm so excited to have you. Me and the 13 million people that have watched your TED Talk over and over and over again. You are the expert in time management. And you started out as an author, a journalist, and a speaker, but really have niched yourself in this very, very special topic. When you think about women who have multiple hats to wear, whether they have their job or their family life and their friends and then their personal life, and you can kind of become reactive throughout the day. Taking control of your schedule and living the life that you want to live is so important to so many of us, and we don't have the tools to do it. And you have all the tools. You have the keys to the kingdom and the secrets. So I'm so excited to have you on today's podcast. Thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm not sure I have all the tools and the keys to the kingdom, but I'll do my best.
Well, let's talk about your background and how you got into this and why it became your specialty.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you mentioned, I just was doing a lot of writing, had a sort of short journalism career for a while, and lots of different topics I liked writing about. But productivity had always been something that was in the back of my head. I was, interested in planners and calendars and all that stuff. But all this kind of came to the forefront when I had my first child almost 16 years ago now. And as anyone who has gone through that transition knows, it does shape the way you think about your time. You suddenly are a lot more accountable for where the time goes. That you have the demands of taking care of a little one, but the rest of your life continues as well. And you're trying to figure out how to manage all these different pieces. And a lot of the literature I was reading about this was pretty negative. I mean, there's a lot of out there of like, women can't have it all. I don't know, or if you somehow manage to build a career and raise your family, you'll never sleep, or whatever else is going to go by the wayside. And so this was all very depressing.
Yeah.
But I decided to study, the lives of people who did seem to be doing a good job at these different spheres of life, and met a lot of wonderful people and wrote about their schedules and realized, I really like writing about time. And so I wrote one book on time called 168 Hours. And then once you write one book on a topic, you kind of get known for that and have continued to explore it ever since. It's, there's how we spend our hours is how we live life. And so really you can get at all of life through the lens of time.
So when it comes to some of the key teachings of how what you deem the most successful people were managing their time and creating the lives that they wanted to lead, because really do have a lot more control over our schedule than we actually, I think a lot of us take credit for or think that we have. What were some of the key takeaways for you in that in the beginning part of your career around time management and really getting the most out of your 168 hours?
Well, the first thing, I mean, that there are 168 hours in a week was kind of a major mental breakthrough for me. And I think a lot of people who realize this. People say 24/7 all the time. No one multiplies it through.
Yeah.
This turned out to be helpful for me for like search engine purposes. Like often you come up with me just because it's not a number people know. But it's a mindset shift in how we view time. If we view time day to day, people always say, Laura, there aren't enough hours in the day to get to everything I want to get to. And it is absolutely true. There are not enough hours in the day to get to everything that is important in your life, but we don't live our lives in days. We actually live our lives in weeks. Like that is the cycle of life that is most representative of what your life truly looks like. If somebody looked at you on Tuesday, somebody looked at you on Saturday, they'd get very different impressions of what your life looked like. But if they could look at a unit of time that encompassed both, they might have a better picture. And so simply thinking of life in terms of weeks automatically makes time feel more abundant.
Mhm.
One of the little math things I always do for people is that if you work 40 hours a week, so standard full time hours, sleep 8 hours a night, so that is 56 hours per week, because 8 times 7 is 56. Subtract these two from 168, we get 72 hours for other things, which is quite a bit of time, right?
Mhm.
In 72 hours, can you see your family? Like, probably.
Mhm.
Can you maybe find 3 or 4 hours to exercise? Well, you might be able to do that.
Mhm.
Could you, read for 2 or 3 hours? Also, probably could.
Mhm.
Even with the various things going on. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's just time is a lot more abundant. But even beyond that, people who spend their time well tend to be intentional about it. And I mean, I guess that seems obvious, but time keeps passing no matter what you do. And so it is very easy to spend time mindlessly in a way that's a lot harder than even with, spending money or, eating food or these other things that people track. If you're spending money, like at some point you have to make a decision for it to go out of your life, like you chose to buy something.
Mhm.
But time, you could lock yourself in a closet and the next 168 hours would still keep going. Like you would still be on the other side of it eventually. And so because of this, we have a tendency to do whatever is right in front of us, whatever is loudest at the moment, whatever seems most urgent, instead of really thinking it through. But the people who think it through just have an incredible advantage over everybody else.
So, what does it take to start thinking it through and being intentional about our time?
There's a couple different directions you could approach it. I find that tracking time for a week can be helpful just for a general sense of seeing what life looks like. And, I'm not interested in keeping score on anyone, like, oh, you only spent 3 hours on this and you only spent 1 hour on this and you spent 20 on this that you didn't want to. I don't care, right? It's
Right.
about keeping track, not keeping score. But you
Mhm.
want to see what your life truly looks like. And then once you see that and see the dimensions of it, you can start asking yourself, well, what do I want to spend more time doing? What are the things that, all things said and done, I would like to spend more time on, more hours of my life? What things would I like to spend less time on? That's another question we often ask ourselves too. And over time, you can start making tweaks with this. But just one of the things I find most helpful is since we do think of our lives in weeks, we want to in general think of our weeks before we're in them. So
Mhm.
taking a little bit of time before a week happens to look at it and say, well, what do I need to do? What do I want to do? What am I looking forward to? What do I not want to do? How can I get rid of that? Do I see any crises coming up I can deal with? What would make this a good week? And sort of plotting that out with a little bit of flexibility, because life happens, and repeat week after week, and things seem to go pretty well.
So, in your personal experience, do you schedule some time on a Sunday to do that? And how do you decide what it is that you want to do and what it is you're saying no to and taking off your calendar, or having boundaries around to really be intentional with your time?
Well, it's interesting that you suggested Sunday. That is when a lot of people do it. I would suggest Friday as a different idea
Okay.
for a couple of reasons. One is that, if you work a Monday through Friday week,
Mhm.
a lot of people by Friday afternoon are not doing anything of consequence, kind
Yeah.
of sliding into the weekend. And so if it would be wasted time, you could repurpose it for planning and sort of just make that substitution. Whereas often people have cool things they could be doing on Sunday. So maybe we
Yeah.
don't want to use that time for that. It's during business hours. So if some of your goals for the next week involve setting meetings, making appointments, or anything else like that, you can reach the people on Friday in a way you can't on Sunday. Um, but also just it allows you to enjoy your weekend more. One of the reasons I think even people who love their jobs often wind up with a little bit of anxiety on Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening is they know there's a bunch of stuff waiting for them the next week. They know they have to deal with a ton of stuff, but they don't have a plan for it. And so that keeps weighing on them. But if you take a little bit of time on Friday to think about the upcoming week, then you've got a plan. You can relax over the weekend. But the truth is the day doesn't matter. Like if you want to plan on Sunday, go for it. What I do want people to do is to commit to taking some time every single week, usually at the same time, so it becomes a habit. Looking forward to the week ahead, setting your priorities, figuring out when those can happen, keep moving forward that way.
All right. No, I love the recommendation for Friday. That's definitely more my speed because I do even find that we'll wake up on Saturday mornings and a lot of times things are scheduled. My son has a baseball game, we have a birthday party, we're going to the beach. We kind of have a general idea of what we're doing here where we live in Southern California. But, with the rains recently, games are canceled. Chris and I find ourselves like having a cup of coffee and saying like, "What are we gonna do today?" And then there's almost like this pressure or stress around, well, we have to take it. It's a weekend. We have to take advantage of it. And then you're on Google going like,
You're
what
spending your weekend
art
morning researching.
gallery?
Oh, no.
What art gallery is open or like what events are happening in our neighborhood that are great in the, for the rain. And I think they're in our maybe it's our generation or like having access to so much information online. You're like, take advantage of your free time. Don't, don't be lazy or rest. It's like, let's go have fun, squeeze the sponge of life kind of mentality. And it's Chris and I were talking about it this weekend. We're like, it's almost stressful to think about we're making the weekend stressful. What are we doing?
Yeah, well, you can certainly, I mean, if you think about it on Friday, you can think through your weekend. And, I tell you, you don't want to overschedule your weekend. Although, when you have little kids, I think sometimes staying at home is more stressful than even trying to get out because everyone's in a foul mood and fighting over stuff and making a mess. I like to have, one or two anchor events per day. And the upside is if you think of it ahead of time and, have these discussions ahead of time and not on Saturday morning, you can look forward to your fun. Like you get up in the morning and enjoy your coffee and you know what you're aiming for. So you don't have to spend all that mental energy and Googling time
Yeah.
figuring it out when you'd rather be relaxing. So,
No, we did figure it out. We did have a nice time at the Laguna Art Museum and we did a little art with our kids. But yeah, it's nice to look forward to things. Like I
mhm.
look forward to the boys baseball game. Chris is the coach. It's our first season ever. He's 4. It's like new and
Aw.
exciting and fun, but it also it's nice to have those anchor appointments. It's nice to have those things to look forward to. It's part of life, I think, really like the anticipation of something and the memories and the recall of it is all part of the experience.
Absolutely.
So taking it a week at a time, I love that because we are such different people on different days of the week. How is scheduling your week a specific way or your day a specific way when you get down to the day detail? How does that set people apart in how intentional they are with their weeks?
Yeah, well, people have different preferences of how tightly they like to be scheduled and when they do things. But part of being intentional about your time is knowing when you are going to have the energy and discipline and focus to do certain things, and when you maybe aren't going to have as much to do that. There's people who think they're going to write the great American novel at 10 o'clock at night, and it often doesn't happen. Maybe there's some people who can, but many people have more discipline and energy and focus in the morning.
Yeah.
Even if we don't necessarily think of ourselves as morning people, that tends to be more of the time where people have that. Whereas, say mid afternoon, many people go through a bit of a slump. So, if you know that about yourself, you might want to do anything that's more intense, that does require more attention in the morning. And you might sort of proactively plan in things that don't require as much energy and focus in the afternoon. And correspondingly plan in breaks during your day so that you can boost your energy levels. I think people who are mindful about their time and use their time well are also intentional about their leisure and family time. So it's, people can come home from work at, let's say, 5:30 and they go to bed at 10:30. That's 5 hours. They have no idea what they intend to do with it. And that'd be one thing if people were like, I don't know, truly rejuvenating and relaxing during that time. But in this modern world, if you don't know what you're going to do, you're going to wind up on screens. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just what the reality of what time does when you don't think about it. But if you have some intention for the evening, like if it's a nice night, go take a family walk in this place, or, I want to read 50 pages in this book, or I'm going to call this friend after my kids go to bed. It's just, by taking your leisure time more seriously, it feels like it has more heft, like it's more important. It's a bigger part of our lives. And if we don't do that, and then it can feel like we're working all the time, even if we're not, just because the things we're doing in our personal life are so forgettable.
Right. And and I think you make such an important point is I think for a lot of people, they feel the stress of their workday and they're looking for a time to decompress, but their decompression is not planned and it's not structured and it's not connection oriented. It's really zoning out on screens. And you wrote a new and exciting book, or the Tranquility by Tuesday Challenge is a 9-week program based on your 9 favorite time management tools. And you outline those in the book. I'd love to take a time to talk about your new book
Yeah.
and all of, I mean, this is kind of the best of all worlds. You're giving us all of the best practices. I'd love to talk through those because you've already, I mean, blown my mind at looking at the week in hours instead of 24/7 and taking advantage of that downtime in a different kind of way. What are these 9, the like the 9 favorite time management rules that you've learned over time that we can all start implementing?
Yeah, I mean, I could recite the 9 if you want me to. I can sort of explain back up here that um, have seen thousands of people's schedules over the years at this point, and people often ask me for time management advice. And I realized at some point that I was often giving much of the same advice, even though people's lives look very different. I mean, just
Mm.
incredible diversity of people out there. And yet, many of us seem to do better when we do these 9 things. Um, 1, give yourself a bedtime. 2, plan on Fridays, right? As we talked about, planning your week on Fridays. 3, move by 3 p.m. So moving for 10 minutes or so by 3 p.m. every single day.
Love it.
4, 3 times a week is a habit. So thinking in terms of weeks and recognizing things don't have to happen daily to count in our lives. Rule number 5, create a backup slot, which is about building more open space into life in general. Rule number 6, 1 big adventure and 1 little adventure. So doing 2 things every week that are memorable and out of the ordinary. Rule number 7, take 1 night for you. So taking a couple of hours each week to do something that is not work, not caring for family members, and ideally is a commitment to something that you can do every week at the same time that is fun for you. Rule number 8, batch the little things. So assigning small windows to tasks that are sort of non-urgent, not important, but have to get done. And finally, rule number 9, effortful before effortless. Doing a tiny bit of effortful fun, more mindful fun before you switch over to the effortless fun of things like screens. Can kind of change your experience of leisure time. So yeah, those are the 9 rules.
Oh, so good. There's a lot I want to unpack, but I want to start with one thing for you a week, being a
Okay.
young mom of toddlers, knowing
Hmm.
that this 3rd baby's on the way in June, and being the full-time working parent. Um, I tend to be someone who feels guilty when I'm away working and then dedicate all of my time to my children and have being a health coach and nutritionist, I'm telling people to eat a specific way, move their body, use a bedtime. And I can get 75-80% of the way there, and then I have this mom guilt that draws me back to my kids in my free time. So, can you give some examples of what that might look like and how we continue to prioritize that for our mental health and well-being?
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I encourage people to track their time is many people who work full time and have children are surprised at just how much time they are spending with their families. Pleasantly surprised in some cases and like, whoa, like blown away in others. Because many times we have this story we tell ourselves that I have a full time job. That is the full amount of my time, which is absolutely not true. 40 hours is not 168 hours. Like if anyone's ever tried to actually staff something that's open all the time, 24/7, you quickly realize you have to hire 5 people. Like
Yeah.
there's no 40 hours is not the full amount of your time. It's
Yeah.
it's a lot of time, but it's not the full amount of your time. You do still have other time for other things. 72 waking non-working hours, you turn to be around your family for a lot of them. And so once you get your head around that, the idea of taking 2 hours a week away to do something else out of those 72 maybe feels a little bit less like it should inspire just, shovels full of guilt,
Shame and
um,
guilt. No,
shame
that's
and
I mean,
guilt.
like, right there. And the math mind in me is like, Oh, yeah, she's absolutely right. I just need to track the time I'm with my kids because I am a flexible entrepreneur that does spend a lot of time with my kids and has afternoons with them. But you're right, I'm not tracking it. I'm just
You're not,
telling
yeah.
myself the story that, well, I'm the person with the full-time job and I'm always gone. And when I come in, they're so emotional and they want to be with me and see me. And so that makes me feel like they missed me so much and I'm not there, versus like, actually, I'm here most of the time that you're
You're here
here
most of the time. Yeah, yeah.
too.
No, I would not be surprised to find that out at all, especially a lot of women who have sort of more flexible schedules, control over their time, have often gone through incredible gymnastics to minimize the time that they are away from their kids. And in many cases would be completely fine to take 2 hours a week to go do something. And making it it can be anything you want. Like, you want to get together with friends, you want to go for a bike ride, whatever, that's fine. But I find the best things to fit this rule is to actually make a commitment to something that you would truly enjoy. So I sing in a choir. That's an idea for people to put out there. You could play in a band or an orchestra. You could join a softball team. You could have a regular volunteering gig somewhere. Those are all things. And people are like, whoa, a commitment. I'm busy. I can't say I'll be there Tuesday night every week. Well, you could. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm not saying you'll make 100% of the time, but could you make 90% of the time? I think a lot of people actually could if
Yeah.
if they did it. And the upside of it being a commitment is that you go.
Yeah.
Like, you go even if life is busy. You go even if maybe somebody else wants you to do something else because, your group is counting on you. And so you go and then you reap the benefits of this act of self-care. I mean, the problem with the self-care narrative, I mean, people are like, "Oh, I'm going to take more bubble baths." Well, that's great, but your bathtub isn't going anywhere. So if you plan to take your bath at, 7 p.m. on Tuesday and your kid wants you to drive them to the mall, like, yeah, your bathtub isn't going to leave. Like, you can do it. Your
Yeah.
boss wants you to work late on Tuesday night. Your bathtub isn't going anywhere. You'll do it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you are playing in a string quartet and you are not there, it is a string trio. Like, you need to be there, and so you can push back on other things. And because of that, it happens. And so committing to the fun means the fun actually has a place in your life.
I really love that. In the beginning of the year, was looking up, I'm a home chef. I'm not a trained chef. I'm a nutritionist. I love blood sugar balance. I love sharing meals that support blood sugar balance. But, sous vide or like multiple cooking style recipes. I'm like, I'm a simple, like, let's roast a chicken, let's roast some veggies. We made tacos. We got a chili in the slow cooker. And cooking classes were something that I wanted
Mhm.
to put on my calendar, and I ultimately signed up for, like, classes through the manufacturer of my oven because it's a steam oven, and I had never used one before, and I did it for 3 weeks, and it was the best. Like, I have such fond memories of that, and I've already used it in my house with my family, and you're exactly right. I need to find that next thing that's gonna draw me in that is expansive for me and makes me feel like just me, not anybody
Yeah.
else. I love it. So, speaking of the free time to do that or scheduling the time to do that, can we expand on the backup slot?
Oh, yeah. Well, this is, as anyone who has a busy life knows, things can go wrong. People are often up in arms and upset about the fact that things went wrong, but that's life.
Normal. Yeah.
I mean, we can expect things to go perfectly and be chronically disappointed, or you can recognize that life happens. And true time management masters don't create perfect schedules; they create resilient schedules that allow them to make progress on their goals, even when life doesn't go as planned. And part of this is simply leaving open space. If you have, let's say, I mean, I try not to schedule too much on Fridays. I plan my week on Fridays, but that only takes like 30 minutes. So the rest of Friday, I generally try to leave relatively open. And the upside of that is that if something comes up during the week and I have to cancel other things, they have a spot to be rescheduled, right? I could try to put them on Friday. And so I don't have to borrow time from the next week, which is no doubt going to have crises of its own. Or if something wonderful comes up, some new opportunity, I get a meeting with somebody I hadn't planned on, but it would be really good to take. I've got a spot. I
Yeah.
can suggest Friday, or I can move other things to Friday and do it at a different time. But because you have available space, you can move things around and take advantage of, you know, new things that come up, or move things around if there are emergencies. So Obviously, it's not easy to build an open space if you are already scheduled, with a lot of stuff, but it tends to be what keeps life from feeling incredibly chaotic, and feeling like, things don't happen even though you truly want them to happen.
When you look at, I mean, this is so interesting to me because I have noticed that as my career has progressed, I really bake in more open space, and it feels more calming. Whereas in the past, I would see 6 to 8 clients in a day back to back prior to children. We'd be going over a week of nutrition, like what did they eat this week? What did their energy look like? How did they sleep? I love that bedtime's on your list and we'll get there. But it would feel like I didn't even have an hour if something did go wrong, or what happens if I was slightly late, the entire day becomes late. So when it comes to scheduling for the most productive people and the most tranquil people, like calm, um, how many hours in their actual workday are scheduled for meetings, calls, Zooms versus downtime? And what makes us the most productive? Back to back, breaks, space?
I think, a lot of that is a preference and it's about your line of work as well. And yeah, if you are seeing individual clients, I know there are very strong, you know, reasons that people want to book themselves solid. I think there's a book of that title, like book yourself solid, right? Because
Yeah.
you want to be. That's how you make your money. but
Yeah.
but the problem, as you explained, is one client's late, everybody else is waiting for you the rest of the day, right?
Mhm.
If somebody cancels and needs to reschedule, there is no spot to reschedule them,
Right.
and that can be very frustrating both for you and for them because they life happened to them as well, and they would like to stay on track with meeting with you, and they can't because neither you nor they can move stuff. And then you don't take new opportunities either. If you're booked solid 8 to 6 every single day and somebody wants to have a conversation with you for some, I don't know, big new opportunity to be a thought leader on this, that it's almost like you're pushing it away because I've got no
Right.
space for that. Like, don't
Right.
don't bring it in. It doesn't have to be much. I mean, people who have a lot of meetings might just try to schedule an hour and a half open. Somebody who has appointments, say on the hour, might try to, put 90 minutes somewhere in the day, like consider it a long lunch. You won't get that all for lunch, but it could, at least it's open. Even just 30 minutes scheduling the afternoon on the half hour and the morning on the hour, like automatically builds in some open space to get caught up from the lateness of the morning.
Mhm.
But it has to be something.
Mhm.
Like if there's zero space, it will be a crisis. If
Mhm.
there is some space, there will be less of a crisis. If there
Mhm.
is more space, there might be even more tranquil opportunities. It's just at some point, you have to optimize for what revenue you need to make. And, sometimes people get around that by raising their rates and having fewer time slots booked. So, you want to get to that place eventually.
Yeah, that was a big change in my schedule, was when I got to a place where a client told me my time was worth more.
Mhm.
And it's interesting how women don't always raise their own rates, but the external world will
Yeah,
do
well,
it
by
for
by the
you.
time the people who are paying your rate are telling you to raise your rate, like you've
So, yeah,
got an issue.
you gotta take it up. Um, but it was really freeing, and it really changed the schedule and the stress of my day. And then it also opened my eyes to diversifying my career in a way that allowed me not to be an hourly employee and reliant on that type of a schedule, because it wasn't calming to my nervous system, and it wasn't allowing for me towards the end of it to really give my clients all of me. I felt like I
Mhm.
was, like most entrepreneurs building their business, there's a point where you go, I'm pouring from an empty cup, back to the drawing board. How do I reset? And that's why I think, your productivity and time management tools are so critical for so many of us, because it is baking in that time for a backup slot. It is baking in that time for you that makes you feel like your own person. Um, movement before 3, that's gonna make anyone feel great with all the myokines, anti-inflammatory chemicals, all the good stuff you're getting from that. But let's talk about some of the other ones, because these are all, I mean, they all are standing out as making big changes in most of our lives. I want to talk about the big adventure and the little adventure. For me personally, we tell our kids everything we do is an adventure. We're like, oh, we have a little adventure. And it's funny that that's the language of choice because I'm like, it fits in to the Levac family. How do I use it? What's the big adventure? What's the little adventure? And how is that something that enriches your week?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is I mean, I can't say I have a favorite rule, just like I don't have favorite children, but this
Yeah.
is perhaps the rule that the other rules are jealous of.
Okay.
And it's because it's been so important to my life and just in terms of making memories. So as we get older, a lot of adult life becomes very routine.
Mhm.
You do the same things day to day, and there's nothing wrong with routine. There's obviously some many upsides. They make good choices automatic, and we need to have routines in our lives. But when too much sameness stacks up, whole years can just disappear into memory sinkholes. Like, where did the time even go? It was like that week was just like all the other weeks. And so this can be somewhat disconcerting. You feel like time is just slipping through your fingers. And the way to combat this is to do some things that are different and out of the ordinary. The phrase I always use is that we don't ask, where did the time go, when we remember where the time went. And so doing things that are memorable allows us to have a more expansive view of time. So, a big adventure I define as something that takes 3 to 4 hours. So, think half a weekend day, right? So, it could be that family trip to the beach on Saturday morning, right?
Mhm.
A little adventure could be less than an hour. So it could fit on your lunch break, a weekday evening, go try out that new gelato place, as long as it's something memorable and out of the ordinary. So doing one big adventure and one little adventure each week, it's just a good rhythm to aim for. Two adventures are not going to exhaust or bankrupt anyone. Like I'm not saying you got to fly to a foreign country every week, or it's just two things. But it is enough to make time feel different, right? So you keep your good routines, but you punctuate the experience in a little bit. So yeah, that's what that rule is about.
It feels, um, similar to Build Your Life Resume. Do you know Jesse's work, Build Your Life Resume? I think you would love this. It's a humongous year calendar, and every
Mm.
single row is a month, and his whole point is that if you don't plan those big adventures or those different trips, like to a museum or whatever the case may be, exactly what you said. The weeks go by, the years go by, and especially in your adult life when you have children and you kind of get into the rhythm of school and work and just schedules, baseball schedule, whatever it is. And that's really fun because it's new. But there's going to be a certain point where it's like, this is our fifth season of baseball and we just changed our color uniforms, or my fifth season of soccer. And it kind of all blurs together. And the cool part is that you get to like really plan ahead and write it down and commit to it. And it's amazing because I have, like in January, I'm like, I had these things on the calendar and I loved seeing them. We had little trips to Mammoth or skiing or whatever it was. And some of them were big and some of them were, like I said, like, I think that's why the pressure of Saturday morning hit us where we're like, what are we doing? We're going to a museum. What museum are we going to?
Uh-huh.
Like trying to, but because you just realize if you don't have those big adventures and those little adventures on the calendar, it's not like prior to kids where Chris and I have a trip to Spain on the books, and we did this, we backpacked in Thailand for a little like, we did all these, like, things that we had time and flexibility to do in our 20s that, in our 30s and 40s, we're like, "What? Wait, what's happening?" But I love that because it's really taking advantage of what's in your backyard or what's in your city and trying and doing new things. It definitely brings so much more color to your life in a way that is enriching and connecting to you and your family members. I think more than anything too. What a special way to spend your days. I think that's my favorite one too. Just because we get in this routine of really wanting to be achievers and focusing only on work or what's next. And you kind of go like, whose goals are these? Are these my community's goals for how I'm supposed to, or my family's goals for how I'm supposed to raise my family or, be successful in my career when you're not really kind of asking like, well, what do I want my days to really look like and be in control of them?
Yeah.
What about what about the effortful before the effortless?
So this is about leisure time. Even the busiest people have some amount of leisure time. But the problem is a lot of it is short in duration or uncertain in duration or comes at low energy times, like at night after your kids go to bed. And so we tend to do what is the most effortless thing possible, which is generally screen time, right? That you're
Mhm.
scrolling around online or watching Netflix or whatever. And there is nothing wrong with any of that. It all has its place. But the problem is, many people feel or find when they track their time that the bulk of their leisure time is spent that way. And if you only have, 3 discretionary hours in a day, would you choose to spend more than two of it on screens? I don't know. Maybe you would, but a lot of people think maybe I wouldn't if I was a
Mm.
bit more mindful about it. And so, I'm not saying people have to give it up because that's hard. But one thing you can do is challenge yourself to do at least a few minutes of more effortful fun before you get into the effortless fun. So, if you are going to watch Netflix at night, maybe do a puzzle for 10, 15 minutes before you go watch Netflix. Or if you're pulling out your phone to, check social media, like read an ebook for 3 minutes before you go to Instagram. And one of two things will happen. I mean, one, you might get so into your effortful fun that you just keep going. Like you're like, I want to find out what happened in that mystery novel. So I'm not logging in over to Facebook. And that's fine because Facebook will still be there later. and so but even if you do wind up, spending 20 minutes on your puzzle and then you watch Netflix the rest of the night, like you still got to do both.
Yeah.
Whereas if you start with the screen time, because it is so effortless, it is a lot harder to pull yourself out of it and do the effortful fun afterwards. And so that's how you wind up with the bulk of your leisure time being those things. So just by flipping the order and challenging yourself to do a little bit first, you can create a far more balanced, perspective on your leisure time.
It's funny because it's those little iBooks, those little ebooks that really mess with my bedtime. Like, I I find myself in airplane mode on what Chris calls my mini books, just swiping pages as fast as I can to get to get to the core of the story or what
Yeah.
happened. And then my bedtime, it's probably the biggest lately been the biggest detriment to my bedtime. It's something I very much enjoy. What's your strategy for shutting it down and getting people to go to bed?
Yeah, it's hard because it is the time we often can have to ourselves. And, who wants to shut down the me time and go to bed? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't want to go to bed as a kid. Now I'm gonna make myself do it. Um, and that's true. I mean, a lot of the other rules that I write about in Tranquility by Tuesday are designed to help people have more me time in their lives at other points during the day, so you're not quite so desperate for it late at night.
Yeah,
Because if you get 40 other minutes to read during the day, then those minutes before bed aren't the only minutes you have. and,
right.
and, and so then you might be satisfied with maybe 30 before bed instead of feeling like you need a full hour or whatever it is. Anyway, I think so. The bedtime is very simple on one level. Adults tend to need a certain amount of sleep. Many people need 7 to 8 hours a night. Most adults, there's a time you have to wake up for work or family responsibilities. So probably you should just count back the
Back
amount of
into
sleep you
it.
need back and
Yeah.
get a number. This has nothing to do with what kind of person you are, how fun you are. Like if you need 7.5 hours of sleep and you need to be up at 6:30 in your morning, then your bedtime is 11 p.m. Like again, it's just math. There's nothing else to it. But if you need to be in bed at 11 o'clock, you need to sort of have a moment of truth that, let's say, 10:30, like, will I be doing this? Am I going to be getting in bed at that time? How much time does it take me to, if you need to shut down the house, like lock the doors, if you need to brush your teeth, wash your face, whatever it is, that you have the time built in to do that. And so I try to start that process around 10 o'clock. Like if I can get ready, get up in my room 10:15, then I've got, at least 40 minutes to read before bed. And that feels nice to have that available to me. I enjoy using that time. But even if it was shorter, just making sure that there is some moment of truth that you set for yourself every night, being like, okay, am I going to be doing my bedtime? You don't have to. Like you're an adult. If you want to stay up all night, you can. But
Right,
if you don't have a good reason for staying up, then maybe you can go to bed knowing that your morning self will be much happier with you,
right, and your children and your husband will as well.
probably.
You're you just shared a statistic that most adults need 7 to 9 hours, and your new book is full of studies and evidence supporting all of these habits. Were there any that stand out to you as really motivational? I feel like the science always motivates me to change. What were some of the things that surprised you or motivated you when you were writing this book?
Well, so I did my own study for this book. After I came up with these 9 rules that I realized, or the rules I'd been telling people most often with their time logs, I decided to put them through the ringer. Like I had 150 people try them out over 9 weeks. They would learn a new rule each week. I would measure them on various dimensions in terms of how they were spending their time, how satisfied they were with their time. And some of their overall time satisfaction, I had a like 14 question scale. Like their time satisfaction rose significantly over the course of the 9 weeks, but on certain dimensions there were higher changes than others. I think my favorite stat, um, was people agreed with the statement. Yesterday, I didn't waste time on things that weren't important to me. And agreement scores with that statement rose 32% over the
Wow.
course of the study. And I think a lot of it was just, stuff like doing the effortful fun before the effortless fun, right? If you are reading instead of being on Instagram, you feel like you are wasting less time. And that came out in the numbers. But even, just having more intentions for your time in general, that people were planning in adventures and they were planning in their night for them, meant that they felt they were spending less time sort of on things that they didn't care about. And they were spending more time actively pursuing the things that they did.
I think some major takeaways for me, other than that 32% improvement that can happen for all of us and not wanting to waste time, is really knowing that there are 168 hours in the week, and that by looking at our calendar and looking at our week hour by hour and really seeing how much time we're spending with our family, or how much time we can allot to all of this time for us, moving before 3 p.m., having a backup slot, and creating these real like time blocks for the things we want to do, that we can have so much more control over our calendar. And you are a beacon of hope when it comes to being not only intentional with our time, but productive, and feeling like we aren't losing our lives to screens. I worry about the future generations. I'm like my mom already. I'm like, what are these kids? What are we going to do with all these kids and their screen time? But being an example for my children about being intentional with my week, having time for myself, moving my body, and growing in it, constantly learning. This is the type of scheduling that I know will lead to that example for them in taking control of their own lives and squeezing the sponge and having a bunch of fun.
Absolutely.
So, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited about your new book, Tranquility by Tuesday, 9 Ways to Calm the Chaos and Make Time for What Matters Most. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of your work. Where can people follow you, find your books? I'll link your TED Talk in the show notes. Definitely go listen to that, guys. But where can people continue to learn more?
Yeah, well, please come follow me at my website, lauravanderkam.com. I blog a couple times a week. I'm still into it as if it were still 2006. I don't know. I never got over it. so
It's so smart and I love it.
I love it. I just, keep writing about stuff there. It's updated several times a week, or you could listen to my podcasts if you like short, every weekday morning tip. I have a show called Before Breakfast. It's about 5 minutes long every morning, something that will help you take your day from great to awesome. And I have a show called Best of Both Worlds that I co-host with a friend, Sarah Hart Unger. And it's about work and family, from the perspective of people who truly enjoy both. So hopefully people will come join us there as well.
I'm going to go take a listen, that's for sure. Thank you so much for your time here today, Laura, and I really appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me.